time they would be joining the meeting?
No, just that they know that they're up
Okay,
early.
all right. Because I made them panelists and they haven't come in yet, so that's why I was just curious.
Okay, I'll message her too if they don't seem like they're on in 10 minutes or so.
All right, we're live streaming.
Okay, great. Thanks.
I have the names of who we're expecting tonight from city planning. Do you want me to let you know who they are?
Katie, I have 6 p.m. I'm going to start the webinar. We should see attendees start to join.
Okay, great.
It should be Juki.
Juki.
David, I'm on.
I'm sorry. I was thinking about your brother's name.
I'm not muted. Hold on. So it should be Alex Summer, Juki, Sai, and Connie Chan, and Joshua Vogel from City Planning joining us tonight.
Thanks.
And then from DOT, hold on, let me just, it's Emily, Keith Bray, Denise, hold on, can't see her last name. Denise Mendez and James Dashiell. I'm sorry, James Henley. That's who's joining us from DOT tonight.
Thanks.
No problem.
Okay, if you're just joining, we'll get started in a minute. Just going to wait for a few more board members to join, and then we'll start.
Why do you not?
Okay. right. All right, I will get started and go through the agenda, and then we will do roll call. I'll just introduce myself, Katie Walsh, chair of this committee on the special committee on last mile trucking facilities. This is the agenda that we have. I just want to reflect that as an update from the agenda that is on the website for Community Board 7. So this first line is still the same at the top in terms of a welcome and discussion among community board members. And then we will go to public comment. And then we'll go to an update from the State Assembly Member's Office, and then go to Department of City Planning, Department of Transportation. Those all three of those are confirmed. There was an invitation here in Sunset Park to the developers of the site between 19th and 21st. That's DH Property Holdings and Bridge Development Partners. We had the contact information, invited them. We have not heard from them if they're attending, so I don't believe they're on. If there is someone who is from one of those organizations, entities, they can identify themselves during the meeting, during public comment. That would be helpful so that we know, but as far as we know, they're not attending. And then we'll go to Last Mile Coalition updates. We have a few organizations that are here representing and part of the Last Mile. So at that point, they'll also open up, and then we'll go back to public comment. So with that, Jeremy, Natasha, would love to turn to you for roll call.
All right, board members and committee members, the committee members, I'm going to call your name. When I call your name, please state that, unmute yourself, please state you're here, and then mute yourself again. Katie Walsh.
Here.
Thank you. Nick Azadian.
Present.
Thank you. Stacy Boyd. Gladys Bruno.
Present.
Thank you. Cynthia Felix. John Fontillas.
I'm here.
Thank you, John. Cynthia Gonzalez. Zach Jacy. Christina Lem.
I'm here.
Thank you. Sam Sierra.
Hi, I'm here. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you. Roll call is done.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to stop sharing this, but I can come back to it when we go back out. So I just want to use this first agenda item is for a little bit of a discussion among the Community Board 7 members, those that are on the committee and Community Board 7 members, on what we've heard so far and sort of where things stand, and just give a couple updates. So we had our last meeting March 23rd. Since that time, a few different things have happened that I want to give updates on, and I will also make sure this all gets reflected in the notes so we have it in kind of latest form. But I'll bring you back. We've basically been meeting as this committee for a year. Our first meeting was May of last year. So now we're at the end of April. So we first kicked this off last year. And in our October meeting, we talked about writing a letter about all of the impacts in the community and reflecting on the fact that we had a couple of these exploratory discussions. At the same meeting in October, we had the Department of City Planning and the Department of Transportation come to that meeting. So we're coming back to that discussion today with those two agencies. But we wrote a letter that then was brought to the full board, Community Board 7 in December, and was passed by the full board. And what that letter did then to outline impacts and ask for solutions, and how was this issue, all the issues that we're talking about from these trucking facilities, going to be addressed? What exactly for accountability, responsibility, what actions would be taking place? So that went to electeds, it went to agencies, including DCP and DOT, who are here today. So they're here today to respond to the letter that the Community Board 7 sent that started with this committee. But then they're here also for additional questions and for board members to engage. So I really want to encourage you to put your hand up, speak up, engage as we talk to DOT and DCP. We also had several other responses to the letter. I'll just note a few of them. We did hear again from Assemblymember Matanius's office. We did hear from the council member, Alexa Avilas's office. We heard from the borough president, Brooklyn Borough President responded, Antonio Reynoso. There's also a response from Assemblymember Abati. And these are just a few of the electeds that responded and that said that they would be interested in having a further conversation on last mile facilities. So those folks are on the docket for us to engage with as a committee and as a community board on this issue. But today is DOT and DCP. The other thing that, other update that has happened since that we'll hear about is legislation that has been introduced at the state level, specifically on the indirect source rule. One of the things that I hope that we can do as a committee when we hear about the state level indirect source rule is think about what this could mean for us, and what the impacts might be at a community board level. And so I'll come back to everybody on that specifically sort of with an ask, but indirect source rule is something that we're going to hear about from the state assembly member's office. And then we'll also hear a little bit more from the Last Mile Coalition around some city level initiatives and legislation that they've previously presented on around special text amendment. So that's also coming at the end of this agenda. So with that, I would like to ask community board members and would like to kind of open up the floor if anyone has any additional points or comments that they want to put out before we would be hearing from DOT and DCP on addressing this issue of last mile facilities and what the next steps might look like. If there's anything that you want to kind of raise now for any framing or any points that you'd like to be made. And then we'll go to public comment. And the way that I will know is that you will raise your hand. And I see Nick. Go for it, Nick.
I'll be very brief. During the last Sunset Park Task Force meeting, DOT had specifically mentioned that they would be undergoing some sort of study regarding traffic and trucking. And so I'm just hoping that DOT will be expanding upon exactly what will be done as the community board has inquired since then and has got some conflicting information as to the depth and breadth of that particular study.
Great. Any other board members wanting to make any comments before we kind of really kick off on the agenda about things that they're thinking about? I'm going to, this is in the minutes from our last meeting in March. And John Fantillis, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot because one of the things that you talked about was, thinking about what a special text amendment could be and mean for our community board related to last mile trucking facilities. And I wanted to, I see you put your video on, put you on the spot since that was one of the last things you said before we ended, if you wanted to share any thoughts.
Well, I think the main issue that I think from when we last met, I think has been amazing is that we've seen a groundswell of support amongst the electeds. The introduction of the legislation for the indirect source rule, I think is a huge win. And I think we are all aligned, not only just in the Sunset Park community, but in addition, Red Hook, CV6, and multiple other communities around the city and the state that are seeing the threats that this type of activity, trucking activity, may have on their own communities. And frankly, I do liken it to the M1 hotel text amendment that was passed a couple of years ago, where multiple communities around the city all said in unison, this is not something that we can let stand. We need to have more oversight over this. And I think the success of that is going to be a preface to hopefully a success with this legislation as it moves forward as well. And to answer your direct question, Katie. You know, I don't know if the text amendment is really the magic bullet here for this issue. I think, frankly, the legislation that the state senator has put forward may be more comprehensive. But you know, I'm open to it. I think any tool that we have in our toolbox is something that is helpful. You know, the thing about zoning is that it's a very ham-fisted tool. It is so indirect, and it's not something that you can use like a laser scalpel. So we've got to find other ways to get to the effects of this type of issue of last mile trucking and warehouses of this type that isn't just zoning. I think we have to use every land use tool that we have available in order for us to get this going. So, you know, I'm excited to hear about all the things that are happening amongst our electeds, and you know, any way we can support that, I think is to our benefit.
Thanks, John. And just to reflect that back, we're talking about indirect source reward after public comments, and we'll hear a little bit more about zoning text amendments, but we also have the agencies, DCP and DOT here, where we do really want to focus on what are the tools available to us now, because anything related to this is later. And the problem, the challenge, and the urgency is now. It was yesterday, it was a year ago when we started this, and the urgency, and recognizing that really, like, we can't afford another year of the situation that we're in. So that's why it's so critical that the agencies came here today. With that, I don't see any other board members with their hands up that are either in the committee or otherwise. So we'll go to public comment. If you have your hand up, and Jeremy or Natasha will help out. If anyone from public comment.
I'll give it a minute. So far, no one has raised their hand yet.
Yep. Members of the public, feel free to use the raise hand function. Katie, I'm not seeing any hands up.
Right, neither am I. Okay, so
Katie, we got a hand up.
okay, great. Go for it.
Alice Erdekian, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, thanks for recognizing me. I'm a member of the Redwood community and have been kind of following along closely. Thank you to the committee for addressing this regularly. We're excited about the submission of the ISR, and want to make sure that we kind of start whatever dialogue that we can. So would be happy to kind of hear what's happening and help coordinate on some sort of email campaign or kind of community voice. So just want to raise my hand for that.
Thanks, Alice. Okay. All right, don't see any other hands. Alice, if you want to provide contact information or a way to get in touch, you would just put that in the Q&A, I think, to share. Okay, with that, I see Jenny from Assemblymember Mateus' office. If you want to go ahead, Jenny, you're next up on the agenda to give an update on the ISR.
Awesome. Hi, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Sorry, I'm in transit. But yeah, I mean, we're really excited. The big update, I think it was last week, is that the indirect source rule, which we came and presented on a few weeks back, is formally introduced. This hit right as, you know, things had wound down with the budget, and the legislators are returning for their last 5 weeks of session. So we're really excited about it. I'm going to, I don't think I can leave anything in there. I don't think I can do Q&A either. Okay. I'm going to leave the, all right, I'm going to leave this in Alice's thread, just a few resources. So there was an article that kind of explains the basic mechanics of the bill. The main thing I wanted to highlight, there's not a lot to update right now, but we do have only 5 weeks left of this legislative session. it is difficult typically to pass a bill in its first session. So I definitely want to just set expectations around that. However, yesterday was a really exciting day for us because one of the bills that this bill is somewhat modeled on, it's a temporary moratorium on cryptocurrency mining through a similar mechanism to do a permit to the DC. That actually passed the assembly yesterday. It was co-sponsored by Assembly Member, it was prime sponsored by Assembly Member Anna Kellis. So that kind of bodes well and kind of, following the dynamics of that and how that proceeded through the Assembly. That was introduced last year, so it was able to pass this year. So, we're learning what we can. I think there's a lot to learn in the 5 weeks left of session that we have. Our team and Marcella, the Assembly Member herself, will be pushing this bill. We will be trying to gather as many co-sponsorships as possible. The specific focus is members of the Environmental Conservation Committee, of which Marcella is not a member, but some of our co-prime sponsors, so like initial introductory sponsors are, including Assembly Member Collins herself. Other than that, what we're really looking to do, thank you, Alice, for sharing the article. That's what I was about to share. But what we're really looking to do is to help support both an inside and outside strategy on this issue. So what that means is that, while we are on the inside of the legislature trying to gain as much support as possible, we would love to support some sort of outside effort led by community members, led by members of CP7, residents of Red Hook, other community organizations in the coalition that have been a part of this, to really do that work of outside lobbying. And the reason that, we're kind of focusing on this as well is because in legislative battles in the past, we've seen that it's really the outside pressure that is most effective at gaining support from legislators. So that's something that we definitely want to start. I added to Alice, one of Alice's questions in the Q&A, just a sign up form. It's very early days for this sort of thing. I know that a lot of people have been talking about, how can we support this bill through an email campaign, through calling our legislators? How can we do something all together that is more coordinated? So at this current stage, I think we're kind of just gathering expressions of interest. If you are interested in organizing for the passage of this state level bill, please do fill out this form and just leave, last mile in the notes so we kind of know where this is coming from. That's one thing I wanted to highlight. And then the other big thing that we have going on is our office has been doing canvases in the Red Hook houses since the end of last year. We are restarting this in a more formal capacity this weekend. So on Saturday from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., we will be canvassing Red Hook houses residents. The focus for these canvasses is typically on housing issues and kind of what our office can do to help with some of the intransigent NYCHA issues that the tenants there face. However, we have had some canvasses where we've incorporated some questions about last mile, seeing where people are at, we think about the facilities, what is the current level of knowledge and awareness about what's going on. And so we're hoping to incorporate that into this weekend's canvas as well. I am going to leave the sign up link in the Q&A as well for this. So there's a lot of things going on. We're really excited that this is finally live. We're really excited to be working alongside you all to be pushing this along and organizing for it. So hopefully this is the beginning of many, many more discussions. There's so much work to do on both the inside and the outside. And yeah, I guess the clock has started. So we're really excited to push this forward.
Thanks, Jenny. And did I hear you say June 2nd is the end of the legislative?
Yes.
Okay, term.
Yep,
Okay,
June 2nd.
so June 2nd. So it's quick. Do we have any questions from community board members about indirect source rule? Okay, I would like to propose so a couple of things. We have our community board meeting full community board meeting 7 on May 18th, which is just around the corner. I'd like to propose that we here in this committee that we pull together something quite simple, but basically that is a letter of support of the indirect source rule that we then bring to the May 18th community board meeting to ask the full board to sign on to. Again, note recognizing this timing. So what I would like to do is to pose this to the community board 7 members that are in this committee. If you would, let me make sure I get my language right, a letter of support for the indirect source rule. And I'd like to do this by unanimous, I'd first like to try this by unanimous consent. And then Jeremy, what else do I have to say?
Katie, you're making a motion to.
I'm making a
letter?
motion.
And you would need somebody to second it.
Second. Okay. So it
I
needs
second this.
You second it, Nick. Okay. All right.
Then you can, the language would be, I'm asking for unanimous consent. Speak up if you do not consent to passing.
Okay. I'm asking for unanimous consent and speak up if you don't consent to passing.
Or you could also speak up if you don't want unanimous consent and call for a voice vote.
Okay. So we'll put that to our committee members.
I don't hear anybody. I don't see any hands up.
Neither do I. Okay, great. That passed. So I'll work on that so we can bring it to the May 18th board meeting. Thank you, Jenny, so much. Okay, great. So I'll keep going. So we are going to pass the next item on the agenda. So we're going to DCPs, first DCP and then DOT. And I know there's a few folks from DCP that are here. First on my list is Alex,
Yes.
but I want to kind of open it to you all. And I know this is, again, in response to our outline of questions we put through in December and as a follow-up to the last meeting.
Yep. Hi, Katie. Hi, everyone. Hey, Alex. Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to introduce the DCP team that's here tonight, and Juki's going to take over. So my name is Alex Summer. I'm the Deputy Director of the Brooklyn office at City Planning, joined by Juki Tsai. He's the Community Board Liaison. Most of you have met him already. Also joined by our team leader, Connie Chan, who's joined us, as well as Josh Vogel, who's a planner in the Brooklyn office, who's undertaking our coordination on last mile and freight work within the Brooklyn office, the Department of City Planning, and with our sister agencies, and as well as Jonah Rogoff, planner in the Brooklyn office as well. So just wanted to introduce everybody and hand it over to Community Board 7's liaison, Juki.
Everyone, I'm Juki. I think I met some of you. Hey, Jeremy. Hey, Katie. Natasha. I know we've been in correspondence. And for those I haven't met, nice to formally meet you. I look forward to working with you more on various land use issues. But yeah, so tonight we're talking about last mile facilities, and I just wanted to kick off a little bit on some of the context for why we're here. Some of this might be repeating what you already know and sort of the broader discussions, but just wanted to kick off with that, which is to say, we've heard and we understand that in response to the growing demand for fast deliveries and just increasing deliveries in general, freight and logistic companies have increased their presence in New York City to meet this need. We know of about upwards of 2 million square feet of what appears to be last mile related space currently planned or under construction in the city. And we're also learning about, or we know a little bit about how they tend to cluster in locations with specific characteristics, those being industrial zones with good highway access and the ability to reach high population concentrations. So examples of that being, like you've told us, Red Hook, Sunset Park, Maspeth, Staten Island's West Shore, East New York, Flatlands, and Hunts Point, to name a couple. But really, all this to say, to kind of contextualize the real concerns that we have heard from you in your letter that we're trying to respond to, which is that there are real concerns from Community Board 7, 5, and 6 around pedestrian safety and environmental hazards related to the sort of truck and van exhaust that more broadly are associated with additional freight traffic around last mile facilities. So again, that's some of just the broad context, and wanted to acknowledge, we heard you loud and clear in your letter, and even before that, and a really important point that I think you made was that we need to learn more about these facilities, and more about the impacts of them as well. So, I wanted to share just a little bit of what we're doing internally, to try to really better understand what we're looking at here, and with the understanding, and Alex is going to talk a little bit about this more, that we really want to know the landscape, and know impacts before we propose any potential action. So internally, we are working closely with DOT, who you're going to hear from as well today, and EDC, to really better understand what's going on with these facilities. I kind of alluded to some of what we know, but we really want to make sure we analyze and understand what's going on. So this work entails, and this is within Department of City Planning, we have our own transportation division, and then again in our meetings with our sister agencies, this work really entails mapping of existing and proposed and planned facilities, really getting a hold on the geographic distribution and the operational characteristics of last mile freight facilities in the city, and then also their kind of broader economic role within the larger supply chain, that is, national, international. We're trying to get a better understanding of the factors that influence the siting decisions. Like I said, we know a little bit about the sort of the usage of industrial zones, with access to freeways and population centers, but we really want to make sure we have a good grasp on that. And then also kind of really trying to understand the nature of the facilities themselves as compared to like more traditional warehouse uses. We understand that these are something that are somewhat distinct in potentially the traffic or the freight traffic that they generate, the nature of it, and we want to make sure that we understand those distinctions. And then kind of finally, or the last couple points, we really want to further analyze and understand the impacts related to traffic safety and environmental hazards. And part of that, again, is this broader understanding of all of the factors that create the facilities. But yeah, figuring out those and trying to make sure that we have a clear understanding of what, traffic, whether it's traffic or environmental hazards, have to do with like each facility. And then finally, we want to make sure that we understand the role these facilities play in industrial employment, both in neighborhoods and citywide. And all that to say, these are small things that we're doing within our agency and with other agencies, DOT and EDC. And we want our understanding to both be local, but also to really understand what's going on with regard to these facilities on a citywide and potentially regional level. So with that, I'm going to kick it off to Alex to just talk a little bit more in depth about, what we would want to know before kind of acting. And yeah, I'll let him take that.
Thanks, Juki. So yeah, to clarify, why are we studying it, I think is maybe a question that you're asking, and want to clarify why we're taking an in-depth look with DOT and EDC. So the first and foremost issue is we want to be careful about any unintended consequences that the city actions can create. And so in order to recommend tools or interventions, it's really, we need to have an understanding of up-to-date research and data. And what that means is about ensuring that we prevent unintended consequences. Some things that come up when we first take a look at this is we know that there's already existing facilities in some neighborhoods, and we're concerned that any action we take could actually further concentrate deliveries out of these existing facilities, leading to overflow outside of what they were already designated to handle. and increase the additional freight volumes out of these. We know that it's potential that restrictions on future facilities could actually increase inbound freight and traffic, which may further impact communities near highways and truck routes. And so those are just two examples of things that we want to be careful about when we start to intervene through land use regulations. Additionally, we know that there could be impacts related to industrial sectors in the larger economy of the city. We don't know what kind of potential delays and uncertainties could occur with the city supply chains. And so that's one of those things that we need to better understand as well. And then one thing that I do want to note is that just defining last mile is extremely complicated. And we would have to define that within zoning. So the first issue is the legality. We believe that zoning cannot be used to restrict a use or facility based on the off-site service for a specific end user, meaning the definition of last mile is really geared towards how a business would operate and sending deliveries to an end user. Zoning can't limit or restrict a use based on where the end user would be in that definition. And so we need to think about how we would be defining these facilities differently. One other caution is about if we start to get a little too restrictive, they may impact other industrial uses, specifically warehouses, which are important for either accessory uses or other industrial functions. And then finally, combined, we have to be careful because this ties back to interstate commerce. And this actually relates back to federal transportation law. And so we want to be careful that we don't really impact meaningfully kind of interstate trucking and freight and commerce, because we actually don't have a local authority to regulate that kind of stuff. So these are considerations that we need to take into account when we're coming up with regulations for this stuff. And I'm putting it out there so that it's all on the table as we come up with solutions together to mitigate some of the issues that we've identified. So all that said, we do have a set of shared goals. We know we want to improve air quality, we want to reduce truck traffic and limit the traffic conflicts. And so I'm gonna, hand it back over to Juki to talk about next steps. But I wanted to lay out those considerations as we start to define either zoning or land use regulations. And then I identify, as was mentioned earlier in the meeting, that want to think through programmatic or even legislative options that may be more effective at curbing some of these externalities on local neighborhoods. So Juki, back to you.
Thanks, Alex. So yeah, to talk just a little about our next steps, we are continuing to work internally and with DOT and EDC. And as we kind of, narrow the scope of everything that I was talking about and really get to a point where we have shareable analysis, if you'll have us back, we would love to come share what we have found through our shared work with sister agencies. And we're hoping that can then shape, whatever the next steps may be, whether it's with DCP or, that information being used for other means to address the concerns that you've raised. And then we are also, and I know DOT's about to speak here in a minute, we are going to be, supporting DOT's Red Hook traffic study. And, I will be handing it off to them, but we're very excited about that. And we will be assisting with that in what capacity we can. And yeah, Alex, did we want to open it up for any questions now?
Yeah, I'll jump in with facilitator privileges here and say that, but before we go to DOT,
Sounds good.
Before we go to DOT, we'll ask DCP some questions. So I wanted to respond to or share the letter that was sent from DCP back to the community board letter that we sent. And we'll make sure that this, of course, is sent out to everybody. And I don't know if my screen view might not be that great right now, but basically what it included here is, thanking Community Board 7 for the letter that we sent through, and then acknowledging it was July, so it was almost it's 10 months ago that you all came to the community board meeting, and then talking about these internal steps that you're taking, and repeating much of what we talked about. You talked about today with impacts. What caught my attention was that you mentioned here, as part of this body of work, that you're proposing a study that will comprehensively examine traffic and truck issues in Red Hook and conduct a trip generation survey of last mile facilities. We are Sunset Park. We're Community Board 7 for Sunset Park. And so in your discussion today, and in this letter, I have not heard about Third Avenue. I have not, which, by the way, we have asked DOT for a traffic study for I don't know how long. Jeremy will know. But I haven't heard Sunset Park. And we, again, have this facility that is identified between 19th and 21st. So before we go to DOT, how are you looking at Community Board 7? How are you looking at Sunset Park?
So as Juki mentioned, I think we're actually looking citywide and regionally. So while I'll leave DOT to speak specifically to the more technical aspects of the Red Hook study, I do want to say that Sunset Park is included as part of our regional and citywide look. And so we will be identifying both the proposed last mile facility and any new facilities that we may see popping up, and look at how that affects both the traffic, the transportation issues, as well as some of the other aspects of last mile as they need to get back over to the mainland and back and forth. So we'll be including Sunset Park as part of that citywide study.
And then I'll ask one other question. I'll turn to community board members. I know Nick has their hand up, but timelines. I'd love to hear a little bit more about timelines, kind of concreteness, because again, you did come 10 months ago. We know this is an issue. You've actually identified even more communities that are going to be impacted by this. So one administration came and went. I'm very interested to hear what your timelines are.
No, fair question. We don't have a set deadline for this because it's basically pieces of work that'll help inform DOT and EDC. But like I said, we're happy to come out regularly to give you updates on where we are with aspects of this work. But I unfortunately don't have a set deadline to give this evening.
Okay, Jeremy, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say, I think the setting some sort of deadline is quite important. John Fontillis mentioned the hotel amendment for the manufacturing district. Well, that took 12 years. And in that time, all these hotels got built in our community, and eventually many of them became homeless shelters. So I think finding out a timeline is vitally important as these facilities are already under construction.
Okay, Nick?
So I have a couple of comments. The first one is really, looking at how we got here. And, there's really no overlap between the Department of Buildings and DCP. And I think in the future, you need to have some sort of overlap where you can see clusters of similar development types, which are problematic in communities. And given that you guys do not see new filings and et cetera, that bit of coordination is necessary to avoid these sorts of issues in the future. Because Red Hook has basically been turned into a giant parking lot, for trucks. That's what's happened. And, we'll be living with the ramifications of this for a long time. Sunset Park, to a lesser extent as well, we have our own issues, but, this is essentially what that inaction has caused. And, do I blame you guys? No. But, in the future, that's how we need to be looking at these issues more holistically than just in pieces. Number two, in terms of when you mentioned define, it's difficult to define these structures. Well, at one point in time, there was no definition of what a mall was, or, a bowling alley, or let's say hotel. So that definition can be developed, and one that is both able to stand up to litigation and whatnot. And, that work needs to happen. Finally, I understand you're looking at this from a city as a whole, but realistically, these structures are appearing regionally. And by regionally, in predominantly industrial neighborhoods such as Sunset Park or Red Hook, in other locations where there was a lot of cheap real estate. You're not going to see this in Midtown Manhattan because the numbers just don't bear out for that to occur. And so while I understand you need to look, as a city basis, you really need to focus on the communities that are being affected because, who would want to live next to this? This would be like me saying, okay, I can go put a, coal power plant right next to Park Slope. You can imagine what would happen there. Finally, in terms of guiding some of the thinking, perhaps if you're looking at similar uses, perhaps a way to look at it to differentiate is say, how are they different? So if it's most similar to a warehouse, you could say, well, okay, in a typical warehouse, how many truck trips do you have a day? And that might be one way to provide a limit. I know you might be impeding commerce to a certain extent, but, a typical warehouse might have, let's say, I don't know, call it, 5 to 10 truck trips per, 20,000 square feet, let's say. So what you'll notice is in these types of facilities, that number is significantly elevated. And so that might be a way to differentiate between normally allowed uses versus uses that are, how should we say, more detrimental to the localized communities.
Give you guys a DCP chance to respond to timeline, urgency, and some of these other points that were made.
Sure. So hear you on the better communication with DOB and understand where they're popping up. We'll be coordinating with DOB. That's one of the ways that we access where these are appearing, and understand that better communication is really key for that. Notes taken on your ideas for coming up with a definition. That's the kind of work that we'll be doing as part of this, is trying to understand how they're differentiated between last mile and warehouse, a normal generic warehouse. So we'll appreciate that. Took your notes on that. Again, reiterating some of the unintended consequences of stamping down of these in Red Hook and in Sunset Park, and then popping up in another M district in another neighborhood is one of our biggest concerns. And so that's why we're looking citywide at all the M districts. We know they're not going to necessarily pop up in a residential district, but that's why we want to make sure that we're treating this as a citywide issue, to your third point. So thanks.
Alex and Juki, I'd love to ask, we've been working on this issue for, in other forms before there was a special committee. This was being discussed in transportation. This was being discussed in land use for a long time. And then it rose to the occasion and the tenor to actually form a committee just on this. And people have given hours and hours of their time. And again, you all came last, 10 months ago. What do you need help with? How is this going to move faster? How are we going to see kind of action? What is your call to action? And what can people do to help?
I appreciate that. No, like I said, we're working on this right now, and we're doing this, and like I said, we're gonna keep coming out to you, giving you updates. I think what could be helpful is identifying specific locations where you have identified real conflicts, whether they're truck or environmental. You guys are the eyes and ears on the ground of what's going on. And so inputting that kind of information into our larger body of work is going to be really helpful from that perspective.
And I will say, Katie, in our conversations about this meeting, you had pointed out some spots along 3rd Avenue. And I went to take a look at some of them a couple of weeks ago, but work like that is really helpful for us to see. Again, CB7 is the true experts as far as being able to understand what pedestrian experience is like with relation to this. So information like that is really useful, and we do appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. And we'll reflect some of this in the minutes. And just to say that I pointed Juki towards the 3rd Avenue, kind of getting off of the BQE, being on 39th Street, the 39th Street thoroughfare, given the fact that we are expecting where would these trucks get on and where these trucks get off. And then also recognizing that we have a school being built there. This is the truck route. So this is, again, all these kind of conflicting uses. So I'd like to go to DOT, and again, we will be able to come back to public comment, public questions that want to be posed. So Juki and Alex, should we pass to DOT? Yeah, okay, sounds great. All right, so thank you. There's quite a number of folks, but I guess I will ask Keith Bray, if you want to introduce who's joined us.
Sure, thank you. Keith Bray of the Brooklyn Borough Commissioner's Office. Also in my office joining me is Claudette Workman, Deputy Borough Commissioner for Brooklyn. Emily Riquelme is also here from that Brooklyn Borough Commissioner's Office. I believe Dash Hilly, my planner, is here as well. Then from Office of Freight Management, we have Denise Mendez and also Ryan Cuffey. Did I miss anybody from your team, Denise? Anybody else?
Yes, we have Huma Hussein, who's
Huma Hussein.
He's as an attendee because she got us a link.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So briefly, I want to talk about DOT and sort of our role in the letter and sort of clear up some of the things that I heard in the comments before we started. So basically, last year we had 2 freight plans. Strategic plans that we passed, we presented and put out to the public. One was Delivering Green and one was Delivering New York. And so for Delivering Green, it basically was a vision for a sustainable freight network throughout New York City and what we need to do to get to a greener future for the city. And actually Delivering New York was all about a smart truck management plan for New York City as well. So to get to the issues that we've been well aware of this neighborhood, and briefly to remind, typically at last mile freight facilities, we unfortunately are not able to, it doesn't trigger comprehensive studies because as you all know, they are as of right. So basically they don't really, there's no review as we explained the last time we were here with you 10 months ago, unless it was a curb cut or something like that, there's really no review for that. So that's really unacceptable in the sense that these are having a massive impact. I understand this is CB7, but a large amount of the facilities that we're aware of actually in Sunset Park. So that's why some of this is going to be, I know it's a CB6, but it's going to be geared to them because they're going to have a disproportionate impact from these facilities, even though a very large one, as we all know, is on 20th Street. So with our limited visibility and planning, we worked on working with DCP and EDC on some efforts to improve on that. So DCP explained some of what they're going to be doing. And so for us, we're going to be doing a couple of things. So one, we're going to explore and engage more than we have before with both Red Hook and Sunset Park. Obviously, the letter also included CB5, which was East New York. And the thing there is that we actually already have a pre-existing study. I don't know if anybody from Brooklyn CB5 is here, but we have a pre-existing study out that we're going to hopefully complete, if not this year, because the pandemic sort of disrupted that study, but if not this year, then sometime in 2020, early 2023, is the Lindenwood Spring Creek transportation study that we hope to have completed for them, which will certainly cover the last mile freight facilities that are open there. So as far as Red Hook is concerned, as I said, that Sunset Park meeting that Nick sort of went to, we're going to have a study there. We're going to start it this year. We're getting the funding together. It's not completely all there yet, but we're confident we're going to have it, and we're going to be able to start that study this year. What that study is going to do is going to be in coordination with DCP and other agencies. We're going to examine the traffic and truck issues in Red Hook neighborhood, including trip generation survey of last mile distribution centers. And that's sort of the question you point out in the letter, the response from DCP, that's what they were referring to, is that study. So when we do this comprehensive study, it's going to go through several steps. Basically, to begin with, we're going to analyze and evaluate existing traffic conditions, try to get information on future traffic conditions, characteristics of travel needs. We're going to engage with the community to talk about what their issues are and problems and public participation forums. We typically have what we call there's a technical advisory committee and a community advisory committee. So we're a part of the community advisory committee. We would speak to people about what their concerns are. We know many of them from both this meeting, recordings we've had from not only the meeting 10 months ago, from many meetings in between that, but it'd still be good to hear from other members of the public and general public about that in the business community. And also the goal would be, even though there may not be a representative tonight, is actually to engage the businesses who are actually running these last mile transportation facilities and get them actually engaged in the process and starting getting information from them. It's going to be very important to work with them to get the knowledge that we need for that. As we do the process of outreach and we gather that information, then the idea is we're going to eventually generate recommendations, improvement measures to address the community concerns we've heard about, reduce congestion, and improve travel conditions and safety. So that is the ultimate goal of that study. As a subset of that, as I also said, that Sunset Park meeting, there has been, unfortunately, a large number of fatalities, at least for that stretch of 3rd Avenue and Sunset Park from 20th to 65th Street since 2019. And so that, though, would not be a part of the Red Hook study because 3rd Avenue, that part is not in Red Hook. I should say briefly, that 20th Street facility, though, is not technically in Red Hook, is going to be in that study. So just to make that clear. But since the rest of 3rd Avenue is not in Red Hook, there's going to be a separate unit looking into 3rd Avenue issues. And that is going to be very similar in that we will probably engage not only with the board and elected officials, but the business community, EDC, SBS, other people about their issues, their needs, the same thing. We'll work with you at CB7 to set up a public forum of some type to begin that conversation. So that's what our idea is for that. So going back to what I said earlier about delivering green and delivering New York, there's a couple of strategies that we're proposing to help with this issue, and we want to get those across. So one is the New York City Clean Truck Program, which promotes cleaner environment by offering incentives for trucks to replace older vehicles with newer vehicles. So that's something we're going to be working on. There's a New York City Cargo Bike Program, where we're going to try to encourage people to shift deliveries from trucks to cycles to reduce double parking and also, again, reducing air pollution. Working with our partners in EDC, where we have a new program called the New York City Blue Highways, which we're going to explore multimodal freight operations at underutilized landings, looking to support barge or other freight and ferry operations to cargo bikes or other sustainable delivery methods to try to lessen truck usage. Of course, we're going to continue to look at our own New York City truck route network and redesign it as needed to meet the needs of both communities and the delivery drivers and the community. There was a local law passed actually for micro distribution centers that we have to look at, and we're going to be releasing an RFEI on that to determine barriers and challenges that exist in establishing micro distribution centers, so that it would encourage last mile deliveries that would be by zero emission vehicles. So that's what we're going to try to propose. Two other things, we are going to try to ramp up our efforts to get off-hour deliveries. So shifting truck deliveries to less congested times of the day, basically 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. And then truck electrification, we are going to work to try to decarbonize trucks by going to more electric vehicles as well to help improve the environment and be environment friendly in deliveries. So with that, again, DOT's goals and aims is to obviously make it a more environmentally sustainable and friendly industry. But safety is always important to us. I said our mission statement, Vision Zero. And so as we look at all of this, obviously Red Hook is a place with a large number of facilities coming. It's a huge burden. And the way Red Hook is situated geographically, it's basically pretty much, when you look at it, pretty much one way in and out. It's tough. So that community is definitely has a lot of facilities there, and we recognize that, and we want to help to improve that. And with that study, we're going to try to look at ways to mitigate that. And again, we're going to look for our agency partners and also with the industry themselves to see what we can do to improve that. Denise, is there anything I should add or I missed?
I think you covered pretty much a significant portion of that. I just mentioned that the industry engagement is really critical for really driving more environmental stewardship and seeing if we can get them at the table to provide more commitments. We have certainly a lot of incentives like the clean truck program that really helps to provide incentives for direct transfer of the older polluting trucks to cleaner ones and generally safer ones. But we will likely, as you've heard today, is really a multi-pronged approach. There's no one-size-fits-all solution that's really going to help us to address these issues. We really are attacking it from all angles to ensure that we have more sustainable freight deliveries in terms of the trucks that are delivering goods to facilities and also to customers throughout the New York City area.
Okay, with that, I'll again take facilitator's privilege and just ask a couple of follow-up questions. And then we'll open it up to board members if there's questions. Okay, so Denise, I think you made a really good point, which I just want to call out in terms of industry with commitments that are being set. You've got the folks who are going to be leasing these facilities, what kinds of expectations and requirements. You've got incentives, but we need legislation at the city level to also put some mandates in terms of expectations and regulation. I think that's why at the state level, indirect source rule is really important. And then looking at city level legislation is needed. And again, this meeting, we invited the developers for these two sites and they did not come. So again, industry is not going to do anything unless there's legislation and requirements. You've got some incentives, which I think is good. But where are these changes happening? We need this action and it needs to be urgent. So with that urgency, I just again like situating everybody. You are here at a community board 7 meeting. We are Sunset Park. Red Hook is our neighbor. What happens in Red Hook affects us. Air moves, right? This affects all of us, but we're Sunset Park. And I've heard now the Red Hook study. Okay, so like you've called that out and brought it to our attention. But Sunset Park, 3rd Avenue. Where is the 3rd Avenue study? The language, Keith, you said was separate unit. I didn't hear the word study. So is there a study being done for 3rd Avenue related to trucking last mile and safety and considerations?
So again, the reason we're talking about Red Hook is that if we're talking about, I mean, I know we're having this conversation about definition of last mile facilities, but the ones that we were been talking about for a long time, the vast majority of them are in Red Hook. So that's why we've been talking about Red Hook. So as far as 3rd Avenue, yes, it is a study. We'll be collecting data. We will be, again, it will be community engagement on it. So even though we're going to have our own data that we're collecting internally, what we really want to do is start off on a separate note to just say, what are the issues that everybody facing there? Clearly, for Vision Zero purposes, I stated, there's been a lot of fatalities there. And so from safety perspective, that's something we're going to talk about. But beyond that, and you brought up the school there, I know CP7's brought up continuously the school at 60th Street. So there's school safety issues there. So that's something we want to explore as well. But then also sort of separate, but similar, obviously it's a heavy industrial area, commercial area. So we want to talk to them about what's going on with them at 3rd Avenue. So it's going to be comprehensive. We'll talk to NYPD, other people. So that's what the study went.
Okay, so there will be, I'm just repeating back, there will be a study conducted by DOT for 3rd Avenue traffic study.
Yes.
Okay, and could you give us a sense of timeline?
I don't have that right now. We probably have that soon. It wouldn't be starting this spring, unfortunately, because of the staffing. We won't start this spring, but hopefully it will start sometime soon thereafter. And that's, like I said, a public meeting, which I think Emily will work with the board to schedule, will be the first step on that.
Okay, let me go to board member questions and then we'll come back. Nick, and then if anyone else wants to put their hand up.
Keith, thanks for coming. It's always good to see you. The question I have for you is in relation to the 3rd Avenue study. What are the bounds of that study? Is this from 20th to 60th Street? Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, we were thinking based on the crash data, it would be 20th to 65th. I know the road changes considerably to get further down, but that was our thought right now.
Okay. And as a follow-up, what exactly will that entail? Are we looking at traffic patterns, including the projected development, or are we looking at only historic data? Because as you know, there's a whole litany of EDC projects that are come online in the next like year or two.
Yeah, it would include both historic, but data on the project you're talking about that come online. Because obviously, one of the things is going to be traffic counts, and it's going to be current counts. I mean, that's been a tough one for us, but depend on. But current counts, but the future counts of those facilities by the waterfront is going to have to be a part of it.
Okay. And then as a final question, will the last mile facility on 20th Street, I know you're including that in Red Hook, but will some of the trips generated from that bleed into this study as well, or how is that going to be accounted for?
It will be taken into account in this study. And again, going back to what Denise is saying, it's unfortunate though they didn't come tonight. We are going to engage with them, and we're hoping that they will cooperate with us in both of those studies is our expectation and hope.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I'm going to give folks a chance. We've got just another minute or two if there's any community board members have any questions. A couple of things that are coming in from the chat. When is the Red Hook study happening?
All right. I don't have, like I said, we're still getting that together. I don't have a firm start date. It's certainly going to be a little bit later this year as well, but we are planning on starting it this year. It just haven't gotten a firm date yet. Didn't get that before this meeting.
Okay, so you've said fall for both Third Avenue and Red Hook.
Yeah, though Third Avenue I think it will start earlier than fall. I mean, I understand summer can be a tough time, but that can definitely start earlier. Red Hook, fall may be more realistic, but didn't get that finalized for the meeting.
Okay, and then are you going to be working directly with Community Board 6 on this?
Yes, well, yeah, so Red Hook will be 6, but again, because we are going to include that facility at 20th Street, 7 as well, and then elected officials, and like I said, it's going to be the general community.
Okay, thanks. This goes back to DCP with Alex and Juki. We have in the legislation that was introduced, the state level last mile has been defined. And we had a presentation in March from City Council, Alexa Vilas, about last mile also being defined that way. In terms of your steps, you kind of outlined things that you need to wait to do. Is there a reason why you couldn't use what's already been defined by these two bills?
Yeah, it's
one bill that's out there, one bill that's not yet out there.
No, it's a great question. I pulled up the bill just now to take a look. I think this shows kind of the nimbleness of legislation over zoning regulations. Again, as I started off in the discussion, the definitions here really, when it was defining heavy distribution warehouse, it's really about end users. Unfortunately, again, we can't regulate land use for an end user. Like once a truck leaves the land that the zoning controls, we can't effectively control that. It does have a 50,000 square foot, it looks like, size, which is a starting place to have that discussion. But again, it just goes to show the different kind of effective nimbleness of legislation over zoning regulations. So yeah.
Okay, and I'm going to ask DOT the same question. What do you need to move this forward? How can you've got folks offering to do community counts for trucking. This is really urgent for all of us. Again, y'all were here 10 months ago, and now we're talking about a study that's in another 6 months. What can we do to have urgency and action? What can the community do?
I think you should continue to do what you're doing, keeping it as a point of emphasis for the community that you've been doing so far. We've taken it seriously, sort of like what DCP said in their earlier presentation. Many agencies are working on this. You made a good suggestion. I heard a good suggestion on DOB. So people are taking this seriously, and we're working on the city level. The elected officials are holding us to account. Obviously, borough president, had some member here, staffer, council member, the same thing. So they are also on this. So I would say what you're doing has already been effective in getting the city to be responsive.
Okay. Yeah, one of the things I heard you say was that budgeting has been a challenge for Red Hook to get that study done. Is budgeting a problem to get the study done in Third
It's
Avenue?
not, I'm sorry, the money is federal, is a study that's getting done, if I'm not mistaken, by federal money. It's just a transaction to get it done. It's not lack of it, right, Denise?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and that was just for Red Hook? Is that the same for the Third Avenue?
Third Avenue is going to be done in-house, but again, that's not a money issue. This is, we're going to do it with our staff, and we already are. That's a study that we will do. We've done for many corridors in New York City, so that's work that we always do.
Okay. Jeremy, I just want to put you on the spot if you wanted to add anything about the Third Avenue truck study before we would move to the next agenda item.
Beyond the truck study, I think we've already heard that Third Avenue is considered very dangerous. So while we're waiting for the truck study, what can DOT do to make Third Avenue, or working with other agencies, do to make Third Avenue safer for all users right now?
Well, some of the things we did was recently lowered the speed limit. It was actually higher on Third Avenue and other avenues. We've added LPIs. I think that's something that we're going to look to do more of along the corridor. So that's something, and there may be some spot safety, short-term safety things we can do ahead of the study. The study will not, even though the conclusions may not be done in 2022, this is not going to be something that is going to wait 5 years to be implemented. We hope to get something studied, looked at this year, and then try to get it done next year is the hope.
And Keith, if I may add, at least as it relates to the Third Avenue study, if there are specific corridors of interest by the community, specific areas that you would like to see more targeted improvements or changes or evaluation of the truck route network based on the local conditions and what you've observed, like that type of information would be really valuable to us as we can continue to do our assessment.
Okay, so Denise, you've given us an invitation to be able to provide that. What's the best mechanism to do that?
I would just say that you can certainly direct that information to the Brooklyn office through Keith's office, and we will get that information and make sure that it's incorporated as we're doing our assessment.
Okay, I would love to talk to you more about how, like, what form that can take, and kind of, what is most useful, and material, right? Material in terms of the data that could be collected. I believe you've got a fair number of people who would be willing to show up and do this, to do sort of these community counts. And I don't want to speak for Red Hook, but that's my sense, in Red Hook as well. So I
just want to clarify that it was not specific to the counts. We typically have certain standards that we follow for when we're collecting data to make sure that is consistent. My response was more so about qualitative feedback, specific corridors of interest that may be of interest to the community. If there are a lot of off-route activity in specific areas, we have obviously a set of our toolkit as it relates to whether or not we need to have signage or also have improved enforcement in certain areas. So it's really about more of the qualitative issues and pinpointing kind of specific areas of focus within the study area.
Okay, thank you. No, thanks for making that clear. Okay, so I think that is a very clear call to action. And Jeremy, I know that we've talked about specific locations like Third Avenue and 39th, and speaking about with EDC about some of the investments that they're talking about making. But there are other sections along Third Avenue that we very easily experience, and so we will be able to provide recommendations to pinpoint. We are going to so I'm actually going to again jump in here and just say if there are questions from the public. So there are two hands, and we'll go to them for the agencies, and we'll jump to Jim. I think you had your hand up first, so we'll go to you, and then we'll go to Carolina.
Hello, good evening. Thank you. My name is Jim Tampakis. I just wanted to clarify, Juki had mentioned something about 2 million square feet. In Red Hook right now, we're up to a little bit over 3 million square feet just in Red Hook alone. We have the UPS site, which looks like they're going to be proceeding, which is on the west side of the neighborhood. And that's going to be bringing us 1.2 million square feet, which the truck route to that facility is going to be Van Brunt Street. And then on the east side, we have the Amazon sites that are also approximately a little bit less than 1 million square feet. And then we have RXR, who is trying to build something, I think, a little bit bigger and more economical, which at this point, that one building is going to be 1.1 million square feet. These are all high cube warehouses. High cube is 28-foot ceiling height. And so we're looking at approximately 3 million square feet that we have coming in right now into Red Hook alone. I mean, if you do some cubic mathematics, it comes out to in order to load these warehouses, it comes out to about 1,000 40-foot trailers per 100,000 square feet. So we can potentially see on the loading of these warehouses, approximately 30,000 tractor trailers coming into Red Hook. And then I believe 20th Street is going to be a similar facility of 1 million or 1.2 million or something like that. So we're talking a lot of trucks, a lot of trucks. The sad part is, which is always worrisome, is the fact that we're right on the water, you know, and if we can concentrate on a water distribution system like we have with the Department of Sanitation, where they bring in all of their recyclable containers, all those containers on the barges. We don't see them, we don't smell them, we don't hear them. They don't create congestion. They just come in via water and then they leave via water. This is what I would love to see happen. And I would love that once you get into these types of situations where you're on the water and you have that available to you, you should be able to use it. And we should have Department of City Planning push these owners, since they're on these facilities and they're going to be creating havoc in the neighborhood, you know, that they should have them, you know, this is something that should be, you know, that they have to do. I just want to also say that when these trucks leave from the east side of Red Hook and they go back out onto Hamilton Avenue, I foresee many of them are going to be making a right turn on Hamilton Avenue and then going on to 3rd Avenue. So I think that the Red Hook traffic study definitely impacts the 3rd Avenue traffic study, because if we're going to have thousands of trucks weekly, thousands and thousands of trucks weekly coming around from Hamilton onto 3rd and then hopping on the highway at 60th Street and 3rd Avenue, I mean, this is all concerning stuff. So, I mean, there's a lot of issues that we have on Smith Street, right on the Gowanus Canal. The old Bound warehouse is a facility that is being built right now, has a parking lot. It's over 200 or 250,000 square feet. When I spoke to some of the workers there one day, they told me that it was going to be a parking lot facility for Amazon. I don't know what the case is, but the issue that, again, that I have is these tractor trailers coming in when they're leaving on these Sprinter vans or these smaller vehicles, you know, there's a multiplier of, like, you know, of 60. So for every one tractor trailer you have 60 Sprinter vans. So that's what we're talking about, leaving the neighborhood to go out and do, you know, these deliveries. New York City is doing, a few months ago, they were up to 2.4 million packages a day. 2.4 million packages a day to end users. And that's where these end these last mile warehouses come into play. So they're going to be stocking these last mile warehouses for quick delivery to the end user, which is going to be right now we're at 2.4 million. We have the ability to bring in the items via water. We have the ability to send the items for delivery via water through New York City's 520 miles of waterfront property, and then have them be met or with these bicycles, either electric or manual, whatever the case is, to go and do the final deliveries. I mean, there's a lot of things we need to do. The clock is ticking. Amazon is going to have their second site finished in the third quarter.
Jim, no, it's okay. Can I invite you if you would like to pose a question or, yes.
I just want us to really understand what we have coming here. So I don't have a question. I wanted to be more informative, and I wanted Juki to understand that he mentioned 2 million square feet. We're at 3 million in New York, in Red Hook, and then we have another million coming into, Sunset Park right there.
Thank you.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
And I appreciate that, Jim. Sorry, go ahead, Katie. I was just going to say, earlier, maybe I misspoke, referring to sort of my understanding of 2 million feet currently in construction. But either way, I really appreciate this added information, both about the amount of space, the amount of material coming in, and what you were saying about various ways of moving it around. So thanks, Jim.
And I also want to say from DOT. Oh, so go ahead, Denise.
Oh, Katie, is it fine if we can?
Yeah. It's
provide
fine.
a response?
Go for it.
So thank you, Jim, for elevating this important issue of using maybe untapped capacity, which is, our New York City waterway. So we are working very closely with the New York City Economic Development Corporation, EDC, to launch a Blue Highways program, which Keith briefly mentioned. This was announced as part of Delivering Green in the late half of last year in November. We are in the process now of finalizing our request of interest for freight movement by water, and to do the exact thing that you described, transloading to more sustainable delivery vehicles, whether it be cargo bike, vans, hand carts, or other types of apparatus to serve the last mile. We recognize that, again, there are multiple prongs to this equation and multiple steps here, and we really want to make sure that we're tackling things from all angles to green the supply chain as best possible and better manage the trucks that do remain after we try to remove some of them off of the streets. So it's really an all hands approach here. We recognize that we can't solve this issue, with one solution. It's really a multi-pronged solution.
I just wanted to add one of the things about this Red Hook study, Jim, is that it's going to talk about origin destinations and where they're going. So that's what the story is going to do, is get more information on that. You were used scenario on Third Avenue, but we want to actually find it out. And lastly, when it comes to these companies, again, Amazon, FedEx, UPS, they actually have their own net carbon, zero carbon goals they set out. They put public documents about this. They want to do it. So one of the reasons I'm hopeful that they'll eventually work with us is that they themselves have their own environmental goals they're trying to reach. And New York City, I think, is a great place where we need to have less trucks on New York City streets. So let's go to help that goal by going these different methods. So that's why we're hoping they'll eventually engage with us on this.
Okay. Thank you. I do want to say that CB6 Red Hook needs its own meeting. So DOT and DCP, I know you talked a lot today about Red Hook, and yes, Red Hook connects, and it's comprehensive, but there's an invitation for you to meet with the CB6. And so we have Jim is in Red Hook, talking a lot about Red Hook. Carolina, invite you to speak, but again, we're here at Community Board 7, Sunset Park. So I'm just trying to kind of keep bringing the conversation, also talking about Sunset. Carolina? Do you have a question, Carolina, that you wanted to pose? Your hand is up. If not, I'll jump to the next section. Okay. She might have stepped away. Okay, so the agencies, I'm gonna release you in a second, but if you,
Here I am.
Okay, Carolina, go for it.
Sorry, I didn't see the mute button in this
Okay,
format.
I'm gonna pose a question.
Okay. So am I able to make some statements or only ask questions?
Yes, just keep it within the 3-minute time frame.
Fine, I'll start a timer right now. So for those who don't know me, Carlina Salguero, I am a founder of a maritime nonprofit. I generally agree with a lot of what Jim Tompakis has to say. About the getting things on the water, I will say that anything that we can do for Ruddock will also benefit Sunset Park because the facilities are also right on the water. So, or at least one big one, so that if we can do it for Red Hook, it also helps Sunset Park in serving a waterside one in Sunset Park, as well as mitigating, reducing the number of trucks that are coming certainly into Red Hook, and I'm hoping also out. I want to also say that I spoke last year to Michael Morella, who's head of the Waterfront and Open Space Department of City Planning, to see if there were any tools that DCP had to encourage maritime use of waterfront property. And he said no. What I want to make a statement, I guess, which is to say, I think the city needs to try harder. Other cities and towns have maritime protection zoning, for example. My involvement in New York City's waterfront goes back long enough to like 1998, before we actually mandated public access when there was a rezoning. That tool did not exist. I in Portside actually did not support it, not because we don't want public access, but because we were pushing for use of the water when the public was going to get there. And that it was decoupled. I'm convinced there have to be ways to do it. The other statement I want to make is that I suspect, and so did Councilman Carlos Menchaca, that Red Hook has so many of these warehouses coming, they're actually not viable for themselves. They have too many, there will be too many trucks, not only for the residents and other businesses here, but for them to be viable, which I hope will encourage moving to the waterways. For those listening, raising Port Authority tolls on the bridges and tunnels the trucks use is another way to do it. And I want to say one thing about, I have a question actually about a truck study, because I'm a maritime focused person, not a truck one. Your study, when you do it, Red Hook and elsewhere, does it only count the vehicles or does it count the users on the street as well? And the reason why I ask is the ball fields in Red Hook are really active in the summer. So if you're counting users who are non-vehicles in the area, doing your traffic study in Red Hook in the fall will not capture what I think is the extraordinarily high risk of killing particularly kids on that street. Currently, the truck route will go through Bay Street, past Basis School, one side of the Red Hook farm, the pool, the food vendors, and ball fields on either side of that street. I, like Jim Tompakis, I'm interested in having Halleck Street to the south reconnected, and I spoke to Marty Marr about that at the ball field reopening after the lead remediation. I think that was a week ago. He was, as I knew, really negative about it. But I'm prepared to encourage people, I won't do it unilaterally, it's not in my right to do that, to approach the state agency to see about alienating that small bit of parkland, which is in fact incredibly lightly used for the greater safety of everybody. So there's my question about studies, the traffic studies. Does it include the people and non-vehicles?
Thanks, Carolina.
It will include pedestrians as well as vehicles, and it'll be motor vehicles as well. So it will separate out between trucks and other vehicles. And that was a good flag on the activity at the ball fields in summer. The study's not going to start this summer in Red Hook, but so that we will try to take some method of getting that in the study. But thanks for the flag.
Okay, before we let you go, there were a bunch of different calls to action. I'm going to try and summarize them, but this is the invitation. DCP, you've now heard about last mile definitions. We have them. You've now, that has been developed. You've now heard about we know where these facilities are now, right? So there's a lot of community assets and observations that's already happened. But you had said that the first part in a study, this is going back to DOT, is community meeting. So is that what I heard you all say, that the first step in a study that we will do for Sunset Park would be a community meeting? And can we put a date on the calendar to do that in September?
So for CB7, the study for Third Avenue, yes, we need a community meeting. If you want September, we can start in September.
At the absolute latest, if we could do it earlier, that's better.
Yes, we may be able to do it earlier. So, but we could definitely do it by September. Maybe we'll do it earlier. So, yes, for the DOT, which I think is real, I don't think it's a DCP. Yeah, we can have a community meeting for a study.
Okay, and that is the first step, right, Keith?
Yes,
Okay.
because we want to hear. We have some data. We have our own thoughts, but we actually want to hear the community's thoughts as well.
Okay, and DCP, would you be hosting your own meeting, or would you be joining DOT in that and hosting that?
Yeah, we're supportive of DOT and EDC's work on this, so it wouldn't be a separate thing. We could come and attend and listen and support their work that they're doing.
Okay, so what I would say is please add DOB to that list. So it would be DCP, DOT, EDC, and DOB. I think that they need to be part of the agencies that are hosting that. So Keith, sounds like you and I will be talking, or Denise, or whoever would like to chat with CB7 about setting up when that meeting will happen.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. All right. So with that, not seeing any other live questions and hands up, I'm going to go ahead to the next part of the agenda. So thank you to the agencies for joining us for the meeting. And there was an invitation to the developers to join for the 19th to 21st Street. Did not hear back from them. So we'll go to the next agenda item, which is an update from the Last Mile Coalition. And that's besides public comment, that's one of the second last items on the agenda. So Last Mile Coalition, we have quite a few folks, and I will ask Summer how you all want to proceed.
That sounds good. Thanks, Katie, and thanks everyone for hanging in there. Before I start sharing my screen, I'm about to just introduce, I guess, everyone on the call. So I think you all know me. Summer Sandoval, she, her pronouns. I'm the Energy Democracy Coordinator at Uprose. I'm joined here with fellow coalition members, Lavinia Reynolds, policy planner from Uprose, also Eva Hanhart, longtime urban planner and land use expert, as well as Rachel Spector from Earth Justice, attorney from Earth Justice. So with that, I will hand it over to Lavinia to quickly review some of the information we've shared in past meetings, and then we can get into the updates. So let me just share my screen real quick. Okay. Everyone can see my screen okay? Awesome. Let's see if I can move the slides now. Okay.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having us here. I know we talked a little bit about this the last time we were here, so I'll go through this these first couple of slides pretty quickly. Can you hit the next slide, please, Summer? Awesome. So currently, New York City zoning treats last mile trucking facilities as warehouses. And as we've discussed, these facilities are built as of right, which means that they don't have any public review process or any environmental review. However, last mile facilities have much worse impacts on health, safety, the local economy, and environment than regular warehouses. And next slide, please. So based on feedback from the community and the special subcommittee, the Last Mile Coalition is submitting an application for a citywide zoning amendment, which would require special permits for last mile facilities. The special permit would establish a public process and environmental review, and would help influence and help create requirements for where and how last mile facilities can be built. Next slide, please. And I believe, as John already mentioned, this is not, there's already precedence for this type of zoning amendment. Citywide zoning amendments have addressed hotel development and mandated special permits requiring public review for hotels. So I will pass this back to Summer.
Awesome. Thanks, Lavinia. And just before I go on to the next slide, also wanting to flag from some earlier comments, not only has something similar using similar tools have been done in New York City, that we have done due diligence and a deep dive, a national deep dive in terms of what other cities, municipalities, and state governments have been doing in the last few years to address this. This is not just a citywide issue unique to New York. This is something that has been popping up all across the country and has posed similar threats and impacts to community, especially environmental justice communities across the country. And so we did not, reinvent the wheel. We didn't start from zero. We built a lot of the research has been directly informed by definitions as given by even the own industry, as well as work definitions and precedents set by other state and cities across the country. So just wanting to flag that. In terms of who's been involved with this zoning text amendment to date, so these are the co-applicants are including representatives from the Last Mile Coalition that represent some of the most impacted communities, so which includes Sunset Park, Red Hook, North Brooklyn, and South Bronx, as well as elected officials in the district. Again, just going over a little bit of like what are like top line items that are within the zoning text amendment itself. So one step, the most crucial step in this is to define last mile facilities. I think as you all have seen from the discussion thus far tonight, that this is kind of a non-negotiable point in terms of how are we supposed to add guardrails, requirements, or regulate anything if they are not actually defined in zoning, in policy, anywhere. So that is zoning text amendment. This strategy is, yes, definitely not the silver bullet in terms of addressing every single last issue in terms of last mile facilities, but it is a very necessary step in terms of defining and starting to carve out specific requirements for how these facilities develop. So this would require a special permit, which would create public review, environmental review, set standards for regular proof and reporting, as well as creating setbacks to prevent clustering from happening, like we're seeing at an enormous scale to date. And also based on conversations happening earlier and in past meetings, really requiring and encouraging alternative mode of transportations, which include clean electric vehicles as well as maritime transportation, to avoid adding any additional diesel trucks and heavy truck traffic onto our streets and highways. And really looking at creating, this is one of those really first necessary steps to creating or a new set of toolbox tools to be able to start leveraging how we address this issue. Something I do want to also note, because sometimes we get these questions, is we're not saying that these facilities cannot happen. It's that they need to happen in a way that is respectful of community needs, priorities, and the impacts that they are bringing. They cannot just be developing and building with with no regard to the communities that they are within and impacting. So this definition, like I said, is not built from zero, is influenced by how different cities and states have defined last mile and last mile warehouses and or like fulfillment centers, and is also based on the very distinct differentiation that the industry makes of itself. The industry has itself identified that fulfillment centers or last mile warehouses are distinctly different than traditional warehouses. So one, we can address this by size. Another is by on-site use. And the on-site use is the time the goods are within the facility itself. So we've heard some back and forth about whether how to include end users or not within a definition. This definition is looking directly at on-site uses of how long goods are within a facility before they're moved out. Most traditional warehouses are storing goods for several days or weeks or months at a time, and not seeing truck trips every few minutes or hours. Also requiring, sorry, this is kind of like blocking requirements for special permit. This is, sorry, blocking the screen a little bit. But really at creating clear rules and regulations for how these last mile facilities can develop. It allows the city to study and mitigate the effects of the facilities and look at facilities one at a time for review as well. And also address the multiple different types of impacts these facilities have on the community. And also provides would require regular and clear and transparent reporting from these facilities so that we, communities that are impacted know exactly or can have these facilities accountable to those impacts and what direct measures are being taken to mitigate those impacts. So what are the additional traffic impacts? What are the air pollution stats? And having that information and data readily available to communities on a regular basis. And then also, like I said, preventing clustering is a really big issue that's addressed here. So that facilities have to be at minimum 1,000 feet apart from each other, as well as at least 1,000 feet from community facilities, from sensitive areas, including schools and parks and nursing homes and public housing buildings. And then, like I said, also to really require and encourage cleaner, safer modes of transportation and transporting goods, which include electric vans, electric bikes, maritime transportation, so transportation via barge or boats, vessels, and then of course on-site interventions that would reduce the environmental impacts. So on-site clean energy would also be part of it. Again, we showed this last time, but just wanting to kind of give a quick update in terms of what the timeline looks like. So I believe when we presented here just about like 4 weeks ago, we were kind of still working on the draft text of this zoning text amendment. We are at a point where the application, where the text is complete, and we have not submitted the application yet. We wanted to be able to meet with you all again before submitting this application. But the plan is to submit this application as soon as possible, and then to really work very collaboratively and together on really building out the public and community support so that, utilizing this tool doesn't take so many years like past applications, and that, we can really be building that public support to move this along. And let's see. And so I just want to close with, so we're here, today giving you all updates, as well as wanting to, pose this request to Community Board 7, or this ask to Community Board 7 to join in on submitting this citywide zoning text amendment application as a co-applicant. Like I said, right now we have over 8 to 10 applicants. And so this is, we're building out the joint application applicant so that we can have diverse and a strong team really pushing this forward. And of course, then here just lays out some of those reasons why. So as we navigate our way through submitting the application, we saw that also that community boards are allowed to be co-applicants on the application. And then also CB7, as you all know, has been, because of even just like this special subcommittee space, has been involved in really bringing the community together and also sharing information, has been really involved in addressing last mile for a minute now. CB7, obviously one of the most impacted communities by last mile, as well, like I said, just really also building out a very innovative and diverse team to be submitting this application to make it as strong as it possibly can. I'm gonna stop there. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of Q&A here. So I just want to pause. I can stop sharing my screen so that we can all see each other. I'm also always happy to go back to a certain slide if you want more information. Also noting that we have multiple members of the coalition here that could really help deep dive some of the questions that you may have. So thanks again. I know we're like tight on time, but I will stop there.
Thank you. Thank you, Summer, and thank you, Lavina. And one of the things that I just want to share is that the actual language that is in the amendment, zoning text amendment, can we share that out? Will you kind of let us know? Because I think folks would want to, before being able to respond to the call to ask community board, this committee, right, to review this and support it, we would want to get that out. Is that something we can share with community board members? Okay. Okay. So that'll have to come. So I know folks are just kind of reacting to the PowerPoint, and there's the actual language will have to come from CB7. But do we have any questions from? Again, folks, thanks for hanging on. I know we're an hour and 45 minutes in. Any questions from committee members about this? You're hearing about it for the first time? I don't see any hands up, actually. Okay, I will, maybe I'll ask a question to Summer and folks around, we have the indirect source rule being introduced. Again, legislation coming up really tightly for June. We heard a little bit about these agency studies. And then now we're talking about the zoning text amendment. And we understand this is a citywide issue. Are you going to any other community boards in New York City to, invite them to be co-applicants or to participate?
Did Rachel want to jump on that question, or do you want me to go ahead?
If the question is about going to other
community boards to join as co-applicants, right?
You might be best positioned to answer, or might know more than I do on that one.
So I guess I can jump in and see if this answers most of the question. I think we wanted to prioritize CB7 for a few reasons. One is the long time, involvement and engagement on last mile. And then two is also trying to determine the timing, right? And so there are conversations around seeing if we can get other CBs and other impacted communities so that there is like the diverse representation. There hasn't been a formal request of them yet. So I am hesitant to say like which other CBs, but there have been identified other community boards within other impacted communities across the city that we're also thinking about. But I think we're trying to balance time, right? Everyone's like, it's been 10 months, what has been, what has been done? A lot's been done, but at the same time, we have to move at a much faster pace in the last 10 months. So also balancing that. Once we submit an application, it can always be amended in terms of the co-applicants. And so that's also an important piece to note, so that, I think being on the same page of how long review could take, how long, what is the process, to get to a decision of what makes the most sense would be really helpful, because we are trying to balance a few different priorities in terms of moving this forward and starting to build community, the more public engagement and community support for it. In addition, we do want to also build as comprehensive of a applicant team. And so I know that's not like a direct answer, but there was a kind of like the multiple priorities in terms of like time that's at play here.
Okay. I would invite you to go to CB6. I think that's what's coming up in the chat. And there are people directly in CB6 who hosted the meeting with us in July. And that is I think there's the Economic Development Committee, and speaking to them. So I just want to good next step is to go to CB6 most urgently, and CB5, who is also part of this letter to all the agencies and electeds. I would also say as soon as possible to get to them. It would again put this on their radar. This is my sense with the committee. Folks would want to actually see the amendment, because what the ask is that this committee would, your ask is that you want to have Community Board 7 support as a co-applicant for the zoning text amendment. In order for us to do that, but the committee members would want to review the text amendment, kind of get a sense, maybe ask some, look at it, ask some questions, and then we could put it to a vote. So that's my sense, right, is being able to get this out to people as soon as possible. There's also something in the chat around posting it so it's available for the public. Is that something you all can work on in the meantime? The zoning text amendment, would you be able to make it available to the public? I think this came in maybe even from Jesse Solomon.
So I think that, again, like Summer's saying, it's a balance, right, of before it is submitted, especially if there may be any small changes or, concerns that people raise. Like, I think once it's submitted, for sure, it would be available to the public. It would be publicly available, via the DCP system, but also, we would post it. I think we want to make sure we have everybody on board. We want to have it in shape before we're like publicly widely distributing the details of it, because these things are subject to potential changes in negotiation. So we want to have it nailed down, I think, before it's fully public. Does that make sense?
Yes, I mean, what I would say, if we still have Jeremy on, I mean, once something is shared with community board members, I mean, it's in the public domain. So, I mean, Jeremy, you can jump in. I don't know the kind of ins and outs, but
that totally makes sense.
Our document public, so if we're sharing it with board members, we could share it with others.
Yeah, so just that is the next step. So if we are asking for Community Board 7 to engage on it, that by virtue of that, it becomes public.
And just so we know, is it posted on the CB7 website, or is it just like, if somebody wanted to see it, we have to share it? Because I totally understand that the community board is a public entity and we don't want to be hiding information from the public. We just also want to understand like the scope of what would be available.
Jeremy, this is a question for you. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
No, it's okay. It's just like, once it's shared with the community board members, what happens next?
Then you get to decide if you support it.
Okay. Yeah, it's in the public domain. Basically, that's what happens.
Right. I mean, we're a government agency. All our documents are subject to FOIA. We could potentially post it somewhere if that's requested. We could potentially send it out on social media or email or a variety of ways, depending on what's requested by our leadership or others.
Okay. So I hope that is helpful context. I'll go to questions. And I'm trying to like appreciate that we're getting depth, but we're also racing towards trying to wrap up as well. So Nick?
I would strongly encourage making that document as public as possible, only because some of the very criticism that both we have received, along with other groups in the community have received from a number of people in that entity and organization about transparency would sound rather hollow then. And in the interest of ensuring that the public has access to this text, along with all entities in the neighborhood, I would strongly, strongly encourage making this a very open and public dialogue.
Absolutely. And I just want to say, like, this is in process. You know, once it's submitted, of course, it is fully public. And I totally understand that once it goes to the community board, it's also essentially public. And we will share it with you because there's no way you can make a decision without seeing it.
Yeah, there's no other intention than that. I think we just wanted to make sure that everyone here is on the same page in terms of the process, but appreciate that.
Okay, so that's really helpful. All right, so this is what I'm going to move to do. The full board meeting is May 18th. I don't want to speak out of turn about when this committee will meet again because we've got to check with like all the other committee meetings that are happening. So after this tomorrow, I'll follow up with Natasha and CB7. But committee members, board members, we're going to meet again. We'll meet again before the 18th. And so in the meantime, Summer, tomorrow, if you could send, what can be sent out, that becomes public record. So we can consider it and just also what the call to action is and what the ask is. And we'll consider it then. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And I don't think I need a motion to end the meeting. I think I just end the meeting. So I'm going to end the meeting. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.
See you soon. Thank you so much. I really
Good
appreciate
night.
it.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Last Mile Coalition.
Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.